The forest lay silent under the pale glow of the moon. Mist curled around ancient trees like restless spirits, and the air carried a chill that whispered secrets. Legends spoke of a king who ruled not a human kingdom but a realm of shadows, a Lycan king cursed to walk the line between man and beast. No one dared enter his domain, none except the queen of the neighboring human realm, who carried a secret burden heavier than any crown. Queen Alara had wandered the corridors of her castle for months, her heart weighed down by longing and fear. The halls of her palace were beautiful and grand, yet empty, echoing with a silence she could not bear. She had married for duty, and now, years later, she remained without an heir. Her kingdom trembled on the brink of uncertainty, and every whispered word from her advisors only deepened her despair. Stories of the Lycan king had long been told in hushed tones around fires and in the quiet corners of markets. They said he could grant life where there was none, but the price was a shadow on the soul, a binding unseen yet inescapable. Alara had tried to ignore the tales, dismiss them as superstition, but desperation is a quiet tyrant. It whispers, and suddenly, even the impossible seems necessary. On a night when the moon hung full and silver above the world, Alara made her decision. She would go to him. The forest had always been forbidden, a place of twisted trees and strange sounds where humans disappeared without a trace. She dressed in dark silks that would blend with the shadows and rode her horse into the mist, each step echoing with the thrum of her racing heart. The deeper she went, the thicker the mist became. It clung to her like cold fingers, and the forest seemed to shift with every step, as if alive and watching. Strange sounds came from the underbrush, the rustle of unseen creatures, the snap of twigs. But she pressed on, her determination afire against the fear curling in her chest. Hours passed, though time felt strange in the shadowed forest. Finally, she reached a clearing. There, under the moonlight, rose a fortress of stone and shadow, towers curling upward like dark spires. Windows glimmered faintly, though no torch was seen. The air was heavier here, filled with power she could not name. And standing before the entrance, as if he had been waiting for her all along, was a figure that stole her breath. The Lycan king was taller than any man she had ever seen, his form both regal and wild. His hair fell like a dark waterfall over broad shoulders, and his eyes, golden, luminous, and piercing, seemed to see into her very soul. Even in stillness, he radiated strength, a dangerous and magnetic force. His presence made her skin prickle with both fear and something she could not name. "You should not have come," he said, his voice low, smooth, yet carrying a weight that made the air itself tremble. "I have come because I must," Alara replied, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "My kingdom needs an heir, and the tales say you can give life where there is none." He studied her with a gaze that seemed to strip away pretense and duty alike. "And what will you give in return, Queen?" Alara hesitated, knowing the answer could cost her everything. "Whatever you ask," she whispered, almost afraid of the sound of her own words. A shadow crossed his face, a flicker of something she could not understand. Curiosity, amusement, perhaps caution. "You speak as though the bargain is simple." "It is never simple. Every gift has its price, I know," she said. "I am willing to pay it." The Lycan king's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Most who come here do not understand the depth of the bargain until it is too late. You may leave now and forget this path, or you may step forward and commit yourself to a fate that will bind you to me in ways you cannot yet imagine." Alara felt her chest tighten. Every instinct told her to turn, to flee, yet something within her, the part of her that had endured countless lonely nights and endless sorrow, drove her forward. She stepped into the clearing fully, and the mist seemed to bend around her as if acknowledging her choice. "You are brave," the Lycan king said, his voice almost a whisper now. "Or foolish. Perhaps both. But bravery is a rare quality, and foolishness, sometimes necessary." He turned and began walking toward the fortress, and she followed. The halls inside were cold, yet beautiful, filled with tapestries that depicted battles and moons, of kings and beasts intertwined in shadowed glory. As she walked, Alara felt an invisible weight pressing against her chest, the gravity of the pact they were forming settling like stone in her heart. "You must understand," the Lycan king said, breaking the silence, "that an heir is not given lightly. The blood must be willingly shared, the bond willingly formed. And even then, the child may carry the curse as much as the blessing. Ilara swallowed hard, fighting the sudden surge of fear. "I understand," she said, though her heart whispered doubts she could not voice. He stopped at a balcony overlooking a darkened valley. Moonlight spilled across his sharp features, highlighting the intensity in his golden eyes. "Do you know what you risk?" he asked. "Not just your life, but your soul, your very essence. And yet, I see something in you, a strength I have not seen in centuries. That is why I have not sent you away as I have all others." The weight of his gaze was suffocating yet intoxicating. Ilara felt a pull she could not resist, a strange mixture of awe and fear, and perhaps, against all reason, desire. The forest, the shadows, the cold stone walls of the fortress all faded as if they existed only to frame this moment. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He turned to face her fully now, and the air seemed to hum with a quiet power. "You must promise yourself to the bargain. Not just your body, not just your crown, but your very will. And then, the path to an heir may begin." Ilara's breath caught. To pledge herself to a creature of legend, to risk everything for the chance of life and legacy. Her heart faltered, then steadied. This was the choice she had been preparing for all her life, though never knowing it until now. I pledge myself," she said, and her voice rang with finality. "Whatever the cost, I will see this through." The Lycan king nodded slowly, as if weighing the weight of her words. "Very well," he said, and a strange calm settled over him. "Then our fates are intertwined. Know this, once the pact is spoken, nothing can undo it. You will belong to the forest as much as you belong to your kingdom, and I will watch over you as both protector and something more." Ilara shivered. Something more. The words echoed in her mind, their meaning tantalizing and terrifying in equal measure. She did not know what awaited her, only that she had stepped into a world where shadows had their own will, where power and longing intertwined, and where love, if it came at all, would be bound in chains of magic and fate. As the first light of dawn began to pale the edges of the night, the Lycan king reached out a hand, dark and strong, offering it to her. Ilara placed her hand in his, and in that instant, she felt the weight of centuries, of curses of longing. The bargain had begun. But even as she felt the strange comfort of his presence, a flicker of unease passed through her. Somewhere in the forest, in the shadowed depths beyond the fortress, eyes watched them, ancient, patient, and hungry. Whatever had observed her journey had not yet revealed itself, and the first whisper of danger brushed against the edges of her mind. She looked up at the Lycan king, his golden eyes meeting hers, and she realized she was already caught. Caught not just by the pact, but by something older, stronger, and far more compelling than she had imagined. And the forest waited. The castle of the Lycan king rose like a shadow against the silver light of the moon. Its towers seemed to pierce the sky, black stone shimmering faintly as if it had absorbed the power of centuries. Inside, corridors twisted like the roots of ancient trees, and every step Queen Ilara took echoed with a soft, hollow resonance. The air was thick, scented with old magic and the faint iron tang of something wild. Ilara followed the Lycan king through halls lined with tapestries depicting battles, moons, and creatures that seemed half-man, half-beast. Each step was a test, though no one spoke it aloud. The tension between them was subtle but powerful, a current that pulled her forward even as fear and awe pressed down on her chest. "You do not speak much," the Lycan king said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. It was a low rumble, full of restrained strength. "Do you fear me?" Ilara met his gaze, steady despite the tremor in her heart. "I do not know if it is fear," she said, "or wonder. Perhaps both." He paused, studying her as if weighing her soul. "Most who come here do not last more than an hour. Their pride falters or their courage crumbles. You seem different." "I have no choice but to be different," she replied softly. "My people depend on me. My crown depends on me, and I am tired of waiting for hope to find me. I seek it here, even if it means walking into shadows I do not understand." A faint smile touched his lips, one that did not reach his eyes entirely. Shadows have a way of testing those who walk in them. Some are broken by it, some find strength they did not know they possessed. They reached a balcony overlooking a courtyard shrouded in mist. Below, silver moonlight kissed stone statues of beasts frozen mid-leap, their eyes lifeless but almost alive in the shifting fog. Ilara leaned on the balcony, her heart thumping with a mix of dread and fascination. "Do you see them?" the Lycan king asked. "They are my ancestors, and yet they are more than that. They are the weight of time, the chains of our bloodline, We carry the past in our bodies, and every choice we make echoes in it. You must understand this if you are to enter fully into the bargain. Elara nodded, though the meaning settled uneasily in her mind. I understand that nothing is simple here, that to gain an heir is to step into something far older than either of us. Good, he said. Understanding is the first test. Courage is the second. The rest, you will learn. For a long moment they simply watched the fog swirl through the courtyard. Then, with the quiet grace of a predator, he guided her deeper into the fortress. Their steps carried them to a hall where moonlight fell through tall windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced like tiny stars. Here the Lycan king paused, his eyes dark and intense. Many have come seeking the power I hold, he said, his voice carrying an edge of sorrow. They wanted life without cost, strength without burden. But every gift has its shadow. You must decide, Queen Elara, whether the heir you seek is worth the bond you must form with me. Elara's heart ached at the weight of his words. The bargain she had made seemed suddenly more fragile, more dangerous. She looked into his golden eyes, searching for something, trust perhaps, or a glimpse of the man behind the legend. I have already made my choice, she said quietly. I do not fear the shadow because I must see hope through it. He nodded slowly. Very well. Then the next step is trust. You must see me as I am, not as the tales describe, not as a king of beasts, but as a being who carries both curse and heart. If you cannot do this, then nothing we forge can endure. The words stirred something in her, a strange mixture of fear, longing, and curiosity. She had imagined power, she had imagined danger, but she had never imagined this, that she might face not only a king, but a creature of sorrow and strength, whose pain mirrored her own in unexpected ways. He led her to a chamber high in the fortress, where the walls were adorned with mirrors that reflected not only the present, but hints of the past. Here he began to speak of the curse he bore, the wolf that claimed him under the full moon, the solitude that had lasted centuries, the endless nights spent longing for connection. Elara listened, her heart tightening with empathy. You have carried this alone for so long, she said softly. Yet still, you rule with a strength few could match. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Strength is often mistaken for courage. But courage is choosing to face what you cannot change even when it frightens you. Most of my kind forget this. Most of my ancestors did. I have not. That is why you have survived this long in my presence. The queen felt an unexpected warmth in her chest, a fragile connection forming between them. She had come seeking life, seeking hope for her kingdom. Yet she found herself drawn into the story of the Lycan king, the story of a being trapped between worlds, longing for redemption, longing for something that perhaps only she could offer. As the night deepened, they wandered into the fortress gardens. Moonlight spilled over silvered leaves, and the scent of night-blooming flowers filled the air. The garden was wild, yet carefully tended, a reflection of the Lycan king himself, both untamed and disciplined. You see, he said, gesturing to the garden, even in shadows, life finds a way to bloom. But it must be nurtured, it must be protected, and it must be chosen, every single day. Elara's eyes met his, and in that moment the air between them seemed to crackle with something unspoken. She felt the pull of his power, the weight of the bargain she had entered, and the flicker of something else, something tender, dangerous, and irresistible. Do you regret it? She asked quietly, her voice almost lost among the rustling leaves. He studied her for a long moment, as if the question itself carried a weight too heavy for words. Finally, he said, regret is a human emotion. I have carried shadows longer than you can imagine. I do not regret, I endure, and perhaps with time, I may even hope. A sudden movement in the shadows made her start. The Lycan king's gaze sharpened, and in an instant he was at her side, protective and alert. But there was no threat, only a fox, silver-furred, darting through the moonlight. The moment passed, yet the tension lingered, binding them together in unspoken agreement. You are cautious, Elara said, trying to steady her racing heart. I must be, he replied. Not everything in my realm is as it seems. Shadows hide more than secrets. They hide dangers that do not forgive mistakes. She nodded, feeling both the thrill and the fear of the place she had entered. It was no longer just a castle or a forest. It was a world unto itself, and she was now part of it, bound by the bargain they had formed. As the night wore on, They returned to the chamber where their journey had deepened. The Lycan King's golden eyes studied her, and for a moment the legend of the beast faded, leaving only the man beneath, the one who had carried centuries of solitude, whose heart was as haunted as it was strong. "Ilara," he said, his voice low and intimate, "to bear an heir is not simply to give life. It is to intertwine destinies. The bond between us will shape more than your child. It will shape kingdoms, shadows, and the course of magic itself. Can you bear this weight?" Ilara's breath caught. She had imagined courage. She had imagined sacrifice, but the truth was heavier, more profound. She felt the pull of destiny, the power of choice, and the stirrings of an unexpected bond. "I will bear it," she said, her voice firm, though her heart trembled. "I will endure what must be endured, for the sake of the heir, and for you." The words lingered in the air, charged with emotion neither had fully named. The Lycan King's gaze softened just slightly, yet the intensity remained. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers, an invitation and a warning all at once. "You have taken the first step into the chains of moonlight," he said, his tone almost a whisper. "The rest will test both your courage and your heart. You will see the shadow within me. You will see the beast. And you will decide, will you stand with me or fall to the night?" Ilara looked at him, her pulse quickening. The forest, the fortress, the bargain, they were no longer distant legends or tales. They were her reality, and the pull between them, fierce and undeniable, had only just begun. Somewhere in the misted courtyard the wind carried a faint, distant howl. The Lycan King stiffened, his golden eyes narrowing. Ilara felt a shiver of anticipation. Danger lingered close, but so did the promise of life, power, and the beginnings of a bond that neither could yet name. And the night waited, silent and eternal, as two destinies began to entwine under the gaze of the full moon. The night stretched long and heavy over the Lycan King's fortress, each shadow seeming to breathe with its own secret life. Queen Ilara wandered the moonlit halls, her thoughts tangled with the weight of her bargain. She had pledged herself to the Lycan King, yet she could not fully grasp the nature of the bond they had formed. Each glance, each word seemed layered with meaning she could neither name nor escape. The Lycan King walked beside her silently, his golden eyes glinting in the dim moonlight. Even in quiet, his presence commanded the air, making her pulse quicken. He led her toward the inner chambers, where the heart of the fortress held not only relics of power but the memory of centuries etched into cold stone. "Ilara," he said finally, his voice low, "you have seen only the surface of my realm. You have seen only the man, the king. But there is another side, a shadow within me that you must understand if we are to continue this bargain." Ilara turned to him, searching his face. There was a solemnity in his expression that she had not seen before, a vulnerability that made her chest tighten. "I am ready," she said. "Whatever this is, I will face it." He inclined his head, a silent acknowledgement of her courage. Then he opened a heavy door, revealing a chamber bathed in the silver glow of the moon. The air was colder here, tinged with the scent of earth and something wild, something alive. "Watch closely," he said, stepping toward the center of the room. "What you see is both my curse and my truth." Ilara's breath caught as he moved, and in the shifting moonlight she saw the change begin. His features sharpened, his eyes glowing brighter, and his form seemed to stretch and twist, shifting between man and something larger, something more primal. A low growl filled the chamber, resonating through the walls and into her very bones. The Lycan King's transformation was mesmerizing and terrifying. She saw the strength, the raw power, and the loneliness etched into every line of his changing body. He was beautiful and frightening all at once, a creature bound by moonlight and curse. Ilara stepped back instinctively, yet her fascination kept her rooted. She had known she would see this, had even imagined it in stories whispered around fires in her kingdom, but reality was always sharper, more intense than tales could capture. He paused, standing tall in his transformed state, and his gaze met hers. Despite the beast, there was still something human in his eyes, a flicker of the man she had pledged herself to, and she felt her heart respond. You are still you," she whispered, awed. "I am," he said, his voice now a deep rumble, "but this is what I carry every full moon. The beast within me is not just strength. It is isolation, hunger, and a shadow of the past. Few can endure seeing it without fear. Fewer still can endure the bond it demands." Alara stepped forward slowly, feeling an unusual mixture of fear and empathy. "I do not fear you," she said. "I see your pain and it is not mine to judge. It is part of you, and part of what I pledged myself to." The Lycan King's golden eyes softened just slightly. "Most come seeking power. They do not care about the curse. They do not care about the loneliness. They care only about what the bargain can give them. You are different. That is why you are still here." Her chest tightened with a mixture of emotion. She had come seeking an heir, a promise of life and legacy. Yet she found herself drawn into something far more complex. She was beginning to care not for the promise, not for the power, but for the man and the beast, the sorrow and the strength, bound in one being who had endured centuries of solitude. The Lycan King's form slowly returned to human, but the residual energy of the transformation lingered, making the room shimmer with faint silver light. He stepped closer, his presence both protective and commanding. "You must understand, Alara," he said, "that what we are forming is not only for an heir. It is for us, and it is dangerous. The bond will test both courage and heart. You must be ready to face the consequences, whatever they may be." Alara swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing on her. "I am ready," she said, though uncertainty fluttered in her chest. "I do not know what the cost will be, but I will face it. I will endure as I promised." A faint smile touched his lips, almost imperceptible, yet it carried a warmth that had been missing from his expression until now. "Endurance is necessary," he said, "but so is trust. Without trust, even the strongest bond will crumble." Alara felt a sudden need to reach out to bridge the distance between them, yet she hesitated. The Lycan King's gaze was intense, almost predatory, yet there was an unspoken invitation there, a challenge wrapped in tenderness. Slowly she extended her hand and he placed his over hers, their fingers brushing. The contact was electric, a spark of connection that neither had anticipated. "The heir," he said, his voice softer now, "will be more than a child. They will carry the strength of both our worlds and the shadow of the curse. You must be prepared for that responsibility. It is not simply life you bring forth, but the convergence of power, destiny, and legacy." Alara nodded, her resolve firming. "I understand," she said, "and I accept it. Whatever the burden, whatever the cost, I will bear it, not just for the heir, but for you." The Lycan King's eyes widened slightly at her words, a flicker of something raw and unguarded crossing his features. "You speak with courage," and he said, "and yet with emotion. Most would fear what they cannot control. Most would flee from what is inevitable. You may be the first to stand without fear." For a moment silence enveloped them, the only sound the distant call of the forest beyond the fortress. Alara felt a quiet understanding settle over her, the realization that their fates were bound not only by duty, not only by the bargain, but by something far older, far deeper. The night itself seemed to acknowledge it, as if the moon shone brighter just for them, casting silver light that mingled with shadow. Then, without warning, a howl split the air outside the fortress, sharp and chilling. The Lycan King's body tensed, his golden eyes narrowing. "They are near," he whispered. "The forest knows when the balance is disturbed. Shadows do not forgive mistakes." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. She had not known fear in this intensity before, yet she did not retreat. Instead, she took a small step closer to him, instinctively seeking the safety his presence provided. "I will not leave," she said, "no matter the danger." He placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and grounding. "Good," he said, "because the danger is not only outside. It will test us from within. The curse, the bargain, the bond, they will challenge your heart and mine. And soon you will see that endurance alone is not enough. Courage must be matched with understanding and trust with surrender." The weight of his words pressed on her, yet she felt a strange calm settle over her. She had come seeking hope for her kingdom, and now she realized that hope had taken a different form, something older, wilder, and more profound than she had imagined. She was not only pledged to the Lycan King, she was entwined with his fate, bound by shadow, by moonlight, and by the unspoken stirrings of hearts yet to be named. As the night deepened, they walked to the outer balcony again, overlooking the forest that stretched like a sea of silver and shadow. The wind carried a chill, and distant cries echoed through the trees, warnings and whispers of what lurked beyond. Alara stood close to him, feeling the heat of his presence and the pull of the bond that was growing between them. You will face the curse fully soon, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The first full moon after the bargain will test both your courage and your heart. You must not falter. The forest watches. The shadows remember, and I will be bound by what I am, no matter how fiercely I wish otherwise. Alara turned to him, meeting his gaze. Then I will stand, she said. No matter the night, no matter the fear. I will stand and I will endure. With you. For the first time in centuries, the Lycan king allowed himself a faint, genuine smile. It was not the mask of power or command, but a hint of the man beneath the legend. And in that small, fleeting moment, Alara felt the stirrings of something profound, not merely loyalty, not merely duty, but a connection that transcended bargain, magic, and curse. But as the wind shifted and the shadows deepened, neither of them noticed the faint, distant movement among the trees. Eyes watched, ancient and patient, carrying the weight of time. The first whisper of threat had begun, and soon it would reach the fortress, testing both the queen and the Lycan king in ways they could not yet imagine. The night was far from over, and the bargain they had forged was only the beginning. Dawn had not yet broken, and the forest beyond the Lycan king's fortress seemed to hum with anticipation. Queen Alara stood at the balcony, watching the mist curl through the trees like silver smoke. The night had been long, filled with revelations she could scarcely put into words. She had seen the Lycan king's curse in full, the beast within him, the shadow of loneliness and sorrow, and had chosen to stand with him despite the danger. Yet as the first pale light of morning touched the horizon, she realized that danger was not only in the shadows. The human kingdom she had left behind did not sleep while she wandered the forest. Rumors of her bargain had already begun to spread like wildfire. Courtiers whispered of forbidden pacts, of a queen walking into the hands of a beast. Some claimed it was her ambition that drove her, others said it was madness, but all of them feared what they did not understand. Alara turned as the Lycan king approached, his expression unreadable in the early light. He moved with the same grace and power she had come to expect, yet there was a tension to him now, a quiet storm beneath the surface. They are stirring, he said, his voice low, almost a growl. The humans, your kingdom, they do not accept what they cannot control, and even among my own there are those who resent the bond we have formed. Alara's heart tightened. She had known that pledging herself to him would not be without consequence, but hearing the words spoken aloud made the danger feel closer, more immediate. What can we do? She asked. How can we protect what we have begun? The Lycan king's gaze swept over the horizon, golden eyes narrowing as if piercing through the mist itself. We endure, he said. We endure and we prepare. Trust must hold stronger than fear. Courage must be steadier than ambition. And you must not falter in your heart, for the moment you do, all will be lost. Alara nodded, drawing strength from his presence, even as unease settled in her chest. She had seen the shadows within him, but now she understood that the shadows outside, the ones cast by humans, by fear, by jealousy, were just as dangerous. Later that morning, they moved through the fortress, preparing for visitors who had come under pretense of diplomacy. Courtiers, nobles, and messengers filed through the grand halls, their faces masks of civility, but their eyes betrayed suspicion and unease. Whispers followed Alara as she walked, sharp as daggers, and she felt the weight of scrutiny pressing down on her. Among the visitors was Lord Kale, a trusted advisor from her kingdom, whose loyalty had always seemed steadfast, yet even he carried a tension, a flicker of doubt in his gaze. Your Majesty, he said, politely bowing, I have heard the rumors, the alliance you have formed here. It is unprecedented, perhaps too dangerous? Alara met his gaze evenly, refusing to show the fear she felt. Danger has always accompanied duty, she said. I am prepared to face it. Lord Kale's eyes flicked toward the Lycan king, who remained silent, observing the assembly with quiet intensity. And him? Kale asked. Can one truly trust a being such as this? Alara's chest tightened. She had expected doubt, but hearing it spoken aloud made the tension tangible. Trust is earned, Lord Kale, she said firmly, not granted by titles or appearances. The Lycan king's gaze met hers across the room, and she felt a silent reassurance. Despite the whispers and suspicion, despite the uncertainty surrounding them, the bond they were forming was real. It was fragile, yes, but powerful, and for the first time, she felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. But hope, she realized, was fragile. That evening, as moonlight bathed the fortress once more, a warning came, a message delivered by a rider shrouded in darkness. The humans were moving against her. Courtiers who had once claimed loyalty were plotting betrayal, using her absence to sow unrest. Some sought to challenge the Lycan king's authority, claiming that a pact with a creature of shadow and curse threatened the human kingdom itself. Alara read the message and felt a shiver of dread, yet she did not falter. She placed her hand over the Lycan king's arm. "We cannot let this divide us," she said quietly. "Whatever they plot, we face it together." He looked at her, the tension in his features easing slightly at her courage. "Together," he agreed. "But know this, the world outside is not kind. Shadows do not forgive weakness, and power does not tolerate hesitation. The moment we falter, the price will be higher than either of us can bear." The night deepened, and the first test of their bond came swiftly. A group of armed humans, disguised as merchants, infiltrated the fortress under cover of darkness. Their intent was clear: to capture Alara and force the Lycan king's surrender, to destabilize both their realms. Alara felt a surge of fear, yet also a fierce determination. She had pledged herself to this man, to this bargain, and she would not allow outside forces to undo what they had begun. The Lycan king sensed the intrusion immediately. His form shifted slightly, muscles tensing, eyes narrowing into golden slits. The air itself seemed to respond to him, the shadows bending toward his command. "You will not succeed," he said quietly. More to the intruders than to her, yet the sound carried the weight of power. Alara stayed close, feeling the pull of the night, the energy of the fortress, and the presence of the man she had chosen to trust. The intruders advanced cautiously, but every step they took was mirrored by the tension in the halls, the quiet movement of shadows that seemed almost alive. The Lycan king moved with a grace and strength that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. He did not strike with anger, but with purpose, controlling the situation with an authority that left no doubt of his dominion over the fortress and the forces within. Alara watched, heart pounding, as he confronted the intruders without hesitation, his form radiating power that could not be denied, and yet, even as the threat passed, the emotional storm between them deepened. Alara realized that her admiration had grown into something more profound, a connection that was no longer solely about the bargain or the heir. It was a bond forged in courage, trust, and the shared understanding of loneliness and responsibility. After the intruders were dealt with, the Lycan king and Alara returned to the moonlit balcony. The night was calm again, yet the echoes of danger lingered in their minds. "You see now," he said quietly, "that the world will test us not only with shadows, but with those who cannot understand what we are forming. You must be steadfast, Alara. The moment doubt enters your heart, the chain of the bargain will feel heavier than any curse." Alara met his gaze, her own resolve firming. "I will not falter," she said. "No matter the threats, no matter the shadows, I will stand with you. For the heir, for our bond, for whatever this is between us." The Lycan king's eyes softened almost imperceptibly, yet the weight of centuries and the shadow of the curse remained. "Then we endure," he said, "and we prepare, because this is only the beginning. The first trial has passed, but many more will come, trials of heart, of courage, and of trust. And soon, you will understand the true depth of what it means to walk this path with me." Alara felt a chill in the air, a reminder that even in safety, the shadows lingered. She looked out at the forest below, where mist twisted and shifted like living things. Somewhere beyond the fortress, forces she could not see or name were stirring, waiting for the moment to strike. Yet she did not feel fear. She felt something stronger, determination, courage, and a growing bond with the Lycan king that no whisper of betrayal could undo. Their fates were intertwined, and she was ready to face the trials to come. As the moon rose high above the fortress, casting silver light over stone and shadow, Alara realized the truth. The bargain they had made was far more than a pact for an heir. It was a test of hearts, a dance of courage and longing, a journey into shadows and light that would shape not only their destinies but the legacy of kingdoms yet to be born. And in the silence of the night, a distant shadow moved beyond the forest. Ancient eyes watched, patient and calculating, waiting for the right moment to challenge them both. The first wave of betrayal had passed, but the flames of danger still burned, and the queen knew the true trials were only beginning. The Lycan King's hand found hers, firm and grounding, a promise of strength and protection. Elara squeezed it, feeling the pulse of power, of bond, and of trust between them. Whatever came next, whatever trials, betrayals, or curses, they would face it together. The forest whispered, the castle held its breath, and the night stretched long and full of shadow. The night hung thick over the Lycan King's fortress, heavy with tension and the scent of silvered mist. Queen Elara stood at the balcony, her eyes tracing the edge of the forest where shadows moved like living things. The past nights had tested her courage, her heart, and her resolve. She had faced the king's curse, endured whispers of betrayal, and survived the first wave of danger. Yet she knew that the greatest test lay ahead, one that would demand not only her strength but the depth of her trust in him. The Lycan King emerged silently from the corridor behind her. His golden eyes reflected the moonlight, and there was a weight in his expression she had not seen before, a mixture of concern, anticipation, and something softer, almost like hope. "Elara," he said, his voice low, "tonight the true trial begins. The force that watches from the forest, it will strike, and it will test the very bond we have formed." Elara turned to him, her hand brushing against his arm. "I am ready," she said, though a flutter of fear ran through her. "I have come this far. I will not falter now." He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips, though his eyes remained sharp, alert to every movement in the darkness. "Good. Remember, this is not just about courage. It is about trust, about understanding the shadow within and around us, and most of all, about standing together, even when the night feels endless." The forest beyond the fortress shivered under the weight of an unseen presence. Ancient eyes watched from the trees, patient and calculating. Elara felt the tension in the air tighten, and a low growl rumbled from the Lycan King's chest. He moved toward her, protective, yet not in a way that demanded submission. Rather, it was a silent invitation to stand beside him, to face what was coming as equals. Suddenly, the first attack came. Figures cloaked in shadow moved swiftly through the trees, their intent clear. They sought to breach the fortress, to undo everything the bargain had begun. Yet as they advanced, the Lycan King stepped forward, his form shifting subtly, muscles coiling with restrained power. His presence alone seemed to bend the shadows, turning the forest into a living barrier. Elara's heart raced, but she did not move away. Instead, she followed him to the outer courtyard, where the mist swirled around ancient statues of beasts. The attackers emerged from the fog, but before they could reach her, the Lycan King's roar filled the air, a sound that shook the stones beneath their feet. The shadows of the forest seemed to respond to him, twisting and curling as if alive. "You will not touch her," he growled, moving with the speed and precision of a predator. His form shimmered with moonlight as the first wave of attackers faltered, their courage faltering in the face of a power far older and greater than any human army. Elara watched, awestruck, as the king defended her not only with strength, but with intelligence and restraint. Each movement was deliberate, each strike controlled, and yet the raw force of his presence radiated through the courtyard. She realized with a mixture of fear and admiration that the man she had pledged herself to was both her protector and the embodiment of the very legacy they sought to create together. The battle raged for what felt like hours. Though the moon traced its path across the sky in silent witness, Elara stayed close, her hand brushing against the king's when she needed reassurance. Every time their fingers touched, she felt a surge of warmth, of connection, a bond that strengthened with each challenge. Then, in the midst of the chaos, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked, and emanating a power that seemed to rival the Lycan King's own. Elara felt a chill run through her. The ancient eyes in the forest had taken form, a being older than any living memory, a force that had been waiting for centuries to test the king. "You dare to bind your fate with hers," the figure said, voice like the rustle of dead leaves. "Do you not see what you risk? The curse will claim more than your soul. It will destroy all you touch." The Lycan King stepped forward, placing himself between Elara and the figure. "I risk nothing," he said, his voice steady and commanding. "I choose what I bind, and I choose it freely. She stands with me, and that is enough." Elara felt her heart swell at his words. It was not power that defined him. It was his conviction, his willingness to protect and honor the bond they had forged. She knew in that moment that the heir they sought was not merely a child of prophecy or ambition. It was the living proof of trust, courage, and love between them. The ancient figure lunged, and the Lycan king met the challenge head-on. Moonlight shimmered across his form as he moved with the grace of a creature born of shadow and light. Ilara watched, feeling both fear and exhilaration as the battle unfolded. Every strike, every movement spoke of centuries of experience, of curses endured, of battles fought in both body and spirit. And then, in a moment of calm amidst chaos, the Lycan king turned to her. "Ilara," he said, his voice urgent, "you must do something for me. The bond we share is not only strength, it is also choice. I need you to lend me your courage, your resolve. Stand with me, fully, without doubt. Do this, and the darkness will not prevail." Ilara's hands trembled, but she met his gaze steadily. "I am with you," she said, her voice unwavering. "Not for the bargain, not for the heir, but for you. Whatever the night brings, I will stand." At her words, a subtle change rippled through the air. The shadows hesitated, the ancient force faltered, and the balance shifted. It was not only the Lycan king's power that repelled the attack. It was their bond, forged in courage and trust, that gave them the strength to endure. The battle reached its climax as the ancient figure tried one final assault. The Lycan king moved to intercept, and Ilara stepped forward, placing her hands on his shoulders. Their eyes met, and in that silent connection the power of their trust surged like a tide, pushing back the darkness. The figure reeled, ancient and formidable as it was, unable to withstand the unity between queen and king. And then it was over. The shadows retreated, the mist lifted, and the forest fell silent once more. Ilara breathed deeply, the adrenaline fading, leaving only a profound sense of relief and awe. The Lycan king, still vigilant, turned to her. "You have done more than survive," he said quietly. "You have shown strength, courage, and trust beyond what most could imagine. Tonight the bargain we made has been tested, and it has endured." Ilara felt tears prick her eyes, though they were not tears of fear. They were tears of relief, of admiration, and of something far deeper. She had faced not only the curse of the king, but the darkness that sought to destroy them, and she had stood unflinching. The Lycan king reached for her hand, taking it gently. "Ilara," he said, his voice softer now, tinged with emotion he rarely revealed. "You have chosen not only to endure, but to bind your fate with mine. The heir will come not as a symbol of bargain alone, but as the living proof of our courage, our bond, and our trust." Ilara squeezed his hand, feeling the pulse of life, of promise, and of something eternal between them. "Then let it come," she said, a quiet smile on her lips. "Whatever the future holds, we face it together." For the first time in centuries, the Lycan king allowed himself to relax, to feel not the weight of his curse, but the warmth of connection. In the moonlight, their shadows merged, a testament to trust, courage, and the beginnings of something profound. The fortress, the forest, the night itself seemed to breathe with relief, acknowledging that the darkness had been repelled, at least for now. And as dawn approached, painting the horizon with shades of silver and gold, Ilara and the Lycan king stood side by side, ready to face the days to come. The heir they sought would be born into a world forged from shadow and light, courage and trust, love and sacrifice. And in that world they would endure, not as queen and king alone, but as partners bound by a choice stronger than any curse. The forest whispered its approval. The castle held its breath, and the first light of morning touched the stone towers. Somewhere deep in the shadows, ancient eyes watched, but even they could sense the power of a bond forged in courage and tempered by trust. The night of trial had passed. The bargain had been tested. And in the hearts of the queen and the Lycan king, a new chapter began, one of hope, strength, and the promise of life yet to come.